How's it going? And welcome to episode 182 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter and on the YouTube at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hasting can be followed at Hasting Kevin. We've got a great final FAAB show for you. And this is always like probably one of the most difficult episodes, Kevin, that we do every single year. Going right up to the wire on filling up the notes and the suggestions and looking up to see the different possibilities of spending that final dollar or two that you still have saved up. As a reminder, as our episode title said last year, you can't take it with you, people. So you might as well throw it all out there. But we'll get to all that in a little bit. Kevin, how you feeling? How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right, Adam. Thank you. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, this is a crazy weekend. We're recording here Thursday evening. Most games are winding down. So we have 10 days as we're recording left in the 2024 Major League Baseball season and in rotisserie fantasy baseball leagues. A lot of head-to-head leagues ending this week. Actually, one I'm in, we ended last week.
Yep.
So hopefully nobody's playing head-to-head championship weeks next week. I think most leagues have gotten away from that. That would be
Yeah.
absolutely crazy, as we're going to see as we're even looking at it for our roto teams. This is, like you said, a very difficult week because we don't know a whole lot about lineups and who's going to be in there. We know who's in there now and who has been, but this next week gets really crazy.
Yeah, I had a finals matchup. The Pitcher List staff league that I was in came down literally to the wire at the end
Nice.
on Sunday. I needed Iglesias to get a save on Sunday Night Baseball, and it was close. But then they went into the bottom or went into the ninth inning, or went into the bottom of the ninth inning tied, and Atlanta was the home team. So I sent a text. I conceded. I'm like, he can't get a save now, and because he's the home team, and he immediately still came into the game. Iglesias came into the game, and he blew up. Right, he like 54 ERA or whatever. And so I'm like, I texted the guy I was playing against, Ben, and I was like, you know what? That makes me feel better because he would have blown the save anyway, and I would have lost and would have felt that much worse. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one last. I'm in the
I'm the
finals of
same
another
way.
one this week.
If I'm watching a game and like I have an SP going, for example, and all of a sudden the game is tied, but the bases are loaded. I'm like, oh, grand slam. Come on,
Yeah,
let's
you
go.
might as well.
Like, he already blew my win. Just shell him.
You might as well tack it onto the ERA and the whip as well. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, I can't also like head to heads that go into the final week. I get it. You do 2 weeks, so it kind of like, you can justify it because it's a larger sample, whatever, but it's no, stop that, people. Stop that. Yeah, my home dynasty league stopped that probably about 10 or 15 years ago. And we go till this week, so we just let the last week play out. You can actually just watch and see the real life playoff matchups kind of unfold. A couple teams have already clinched either their playoff spots or their division. In the case of Milwaukee, I know the Yankees clinched a playoff spot. Yep. But there's still some fight, especially for that final wild card spot. Your Royals haven't clinched yet, but they look pretty solid to be in that 2-hole of the wild card spot at the moment. My Red Sox haven't been mathematically eliminated yet, but it's not looking very good. And as we'll talk about later on in the show, they've got some things that they need to push through on the roster as well as far as injuries are concerned. So yeah, there's still a lot of things that can unfold. I don't know that we'll get to like I know they basically I don't think they can do a 163 anymore, right? They put enough like tiebreakers built in and all that stuff. which is unfortunate. But at the same time, we have an extra playoff, series to watch as well. So, still plenty
Which
of
is
baseball to
amazing.
enjoy.
That I love, we could have a whole week's worth of shows talking about playoff format and that thing. But the thing that is amazing about it, the one thing, whether you like this format or not, I don't know anybody that would not like the way they do the scheduling of this format, right? All four wild card series being played on 3 consecutive days, the same 3 consecutive
Yes.
days, right? The Tuesday after the season ends on Sunday, we have 4 playoff games. On Wednesday, after the season just ended on
Yep.
Sunday, we have 4
Or
elimination playoff games guaranteed, right? I really like the way that portion of this works out, whether, all the other stuff about the format and everything. Like I
right.
said, we could discuss that for weeks, but I we get elimination baseball the second day of the postseason. 4 of them.
Yeah,
That's
because
amazing.
once you get to the next round, once you get to the divisional, the NLDS and the ALDS and even the round prior to that, there's always like that one like series that like starts with one game and then all of a sudden they have an off day and then they play like 2 or 3 games in a row. It's just yes, I echo exactly what you said. I like that all 3 games are played in a row if there's a third game, and they're all series. I wasn't a fan of the single game wild card format that was there prior. So I like, it's a short series. I admit that, but it's a series that we see all regular season, right? Like
Yeah.
we always say they always say like, oh, they won the series or they swept the series or whatever. So, might as well make the first round. It's a wild card. It's an expanded playoff field anyway. So it doesn't need to be a 7-game series. It doesn't need to be like the NBA playoffs where literally more than half the league makes the playoffs and you play 7 games pretty much the entire way through for each series.
Yeah.
That's probably a little much. But you know what? We still got playoff baseball, fantasy baseball to talk about. We still got, the stretch run, if you will, like the final couple feet of your 400-meter dash, whatever you're looking, however you're looking at your season long. We still got 10 days to crunch it out. So let's get into some news items that did come across the desk that may impact how you are spending those final FAAB dollars that you have. Kevin, I'm going to start here in Toronto. A lot to talk about in Toronto, actually. First, this just happened today. Kevin Gossman went 5 innings, but got pulled after his final warm-up pitch going into the 6th inning, where he reported some back tightness. Only pitched 59 innings or 59 pitches in those 5 innings. So in theory, would have gone at least through the 6th into the 7th, possibly. Do you, because of the way he got pulled out, even though he was being very efficient, even though he was pitching well, are you trusting him in what he says will be his final start of the season next week? He's expecting to make that start.
Uh, I don't think we've trusted Kevin Gosman for most of this season.
Fair.
So trust is probably not the right word. He gets Boston at home in Toronto. Uh, if he makes the start on the normal 4 days rest. Boston hasn't been, what they were for a large part of the second half, the best offense in baseball. They've kind of slumped recently, and then they put up some runs in a game or two here recently as well. We're more scared of them when they're at home in Fenway. But I this every single thing we talk about this week and every single thing we talk about ever, this can be said, and we say it a lot, but we're really gonna say it a lot this week. This is really team and league dependent on what you need.
Sure.
I would hope that in most instances, I can probably find someone I'm more optimistic about than Kevin Gossman versus the Boston lineup. There will be instances where that's not the case, though, and we're sweating and rolling him out there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just a situation where it's like, yes, you already don't trust him 100% if he is going to go out there and he's 100%. It's a matter that will he actually make this start? And if he does, how long will he actually go for ultimately a meaningless game for his team, for him, and yes, I agree with your sentiment. I hope I'm not in a position where it's like I don't have another choice. I guarantee you, there's a 15 team league out there where somebody has Gossman. They're like, I got nothing else. I got nothing,
Right.
or I got nothing else that I trust more than this situation.
I think
For
it was
sure.
2 starts ago, he looked like, "Oh, this
Sure.
this
Yep. Yep.
is, this is Kevin Gossman." That's what you're really hoping for.
You cross your fingers, hold your nose, and see what
Yeah,
happens.
there's gonna be
Um,
a lot of that this week.
oh yeah, yeah, a lot of holding noses. Yep. No one's gonna smell anything. Staying in Toronto here, Bo Bichette back from the IL. Very exciting. One day later, back on the IL, now with a fractured middle finger, which is very unfortunate. Not really anything to say here. You may have already dropped him. Now you know you don't need to pick him back up. And if you didn't drop him, now go right ahead and make him your drop for the last couple dollars of FAAB that you have to spend. But I think the interesting is the corresponding move. The interesting piece here, Kevin, is the corresponding move by the Blue Jays. They called back up Jonathan Class A outfielder, speedster. They got over from Seattle somewhat recently. Can you see? I mean, is this an interesting move here? Because Clase has one very calling card of a talent. He can run, he can steal bases. At one point, he could hit the ball as well. Can you see Toronto giving him any kind of a runway here in the last 10 days where he could actually be useful?
Don't think so. I mean, if he could it if he was better at getting on base, I could see them trying to get him into the lineup on even somewhat of a regular basis. This is one of those guys he wouldn't have to be starting every day to be valuable. And in fact, even without starting at all, yeah, he could be the Dairon Blanco type
Mhm.
here, or even more extreme than that, Terrence Gore. Right? But Toronto's not going anywhere. So I don't know that that's going to be a big priority is for them to get him into the game late in games to see what he can do on the base paths. Typically we saw Terrence Gore for several years every every August would latch on with a team that was going to the postseason. And
Every year.
even if they didn't put him on the postseason roster, they would use him when the roster's expanded, even though it's only by 2 players now in September. They would use him throughout that month, that final month, to help, maybe get them over the top in a game or 2 late in games. But I just, Toronto's not going to the postseason, so I don't know how much that is going to come into play. Um, it's just like you said, at one time he could hit for average, but the last couple of seasons, he doesn't even get on base. 288 OBP at AAA this year, much lower than that in the majors, very small sample. But yeah, I just don't think he gets on base enough for me to have interest here, unfortunately, because that would be a nice little kick to our stolen base category for the final week of the season.
Let's keep in mind, Terrence Gore has 2 World Series rings to his
Yes,
name.
he does.
Because and he's not even the name. I can't there. I feel like there's another guy in that same vein who just kept getting picked up. I think it was through the teens. I don't know. I'm gonna look it up at some point. But that I feel like was always somehow always on the World Series roster, like of one of the two teams, whether they won or not, I'm not sure. But Gore, yeah, won a ring in 2020, one in 2020. Obviously, one with the Dodgers and one with Atlanta. And so good for him. Good for him. Very similar move here in now this time though in Cleveland, where Stephen Kwan hit the IL, and in replacement for him with the Guardians on the Guardians roster will be Miles Straw. Miles Straw, obviously very famously being picked up anywhere between like the 8th and 12th rounds, just as recently as 2 years ago, 2 drafts ago. Um, Obviously did not pan out in that way. But so my question is less about Miles Straw specifically, but I'm going to compare him to Jonathan Clase. Kevin, or who gets more hits from here like, in the final week of the season, Miles Straw or Jonathan Clase for the Blue Jays? Obviously, it depends on
I'd
how
go
many
with
at bats they're going to
Clase.
get and all that good stuff. But
I'm gonna go with Clase. I don't think he's gonna get much playing time, but he might get more than Miles Straw. I think Miles Straw is just here as a defensive
mascot,
replacement, depth, and I do not think we'll see Miles Straw. Maybe down this final week as they're resting other guys, he gets a start or two. I don't think we'll see him starting games in the postseason. We may see him on the postseason roster because he could fill that position that we were just talking about. But I do think Clase down the stretch here probably gets more opportunities than Straw. I just don't. I mean, if Cleveland wanted Miles Straw in their lineup, he's been there for them all season.
right, is fair. So if not hits, then now they both could be filling the same role we just talked about.
Yeah,
Who
then
gets
hits
more
don't
stolen
matter
bases in the final week of the season?
because Cleveland is still playing for the division and then trying to work things out for what they're going to do in the postseason. I think there is a chance that in this scenario, uh, depending on what happens with the health of the rest of the roster over the final week and a half, Miles Straw could be on the postseason roster here, or at least for certain series, depending on how far Cleveland makes it. So I think he will. Um, at least get into the game as a defensive replacement most days towards the end of the game. And if that leads to a pinch hit, if a game goes in
Or
extra
a pinch
innings,
run
if
situation?
he
Yeah,
pinch runs earlier in the game in anticipation that he's coming in on defense, I think we probably get more stolen base opportunities out of Miles Straw. I'd still take Clase for hits, and that seems really weird to me, but I think that's the way I'd go.
all right. No, that's fine. I hopefully this is also not an actual decision any of you guys out there have to be making, but
Yeah,
but
but there are
stolen
some deep
bases in the
leagues where
category. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
All right. This gonna skip that one. We'll go into Baltimore here first. Not really a whole lot of action to take on this note either, Kevin, but I think it's worth mentioning. Kimbrell DFA'd by the Baltimore Orioles. He is about 24 hours into that DFA as we are recording this. So I believe we'll know his fate definitely by the time you're listening to this, but in the next 24 hours, whether or not he becomes a free agent, he obviously won't take whatever option or demotion that they're offering and become a free agent, or if he actually gets picked up by any playoff, contending team, assuming he would also be eligible or they find a way to manipulate it so he'd be eligible for the playoff spots. Is there a playoff team that could use Kimbrel, whether it's in the 6th inning or trust him enough to be in the 8th or 9th inning?
I wouldn't go as far as saying trust
Trust.
him, but yeah, I I mean, there's teams that are still hoping and some expecting to make the postseason that could use a bullpen arm. I mean, my Royals could absolutely use a bullpen arm. I don't know that I do know I would not be excited if they would somehow acquire Craig Kimbrell for
I
that
could see
role.
a team like
But I think
Detroit.
somebody will take a chance, right? Because here the thing is, we have seen really, really bad Craig Kimbrell in the past, and then we have seen him bounce right back
Yep.
to
Yep.
what some people believe is a Hall of Fame career here for Craig Kimbrell. We've seen him bounce back to it from being really bad. So somebody probably gives him a chance, I would think.
Yeah, I'm actually more tempted to think that it's going to be one of the teams right on the outside and that need that extra push, like a Detroit, like who's right
Mhm.
outside the American League wild card spot. Um, Maybe Seattle. Again, these are the two teams that are right outside that final slot in the American League, and they're just either they're stretching their bullpens too much as it is right now, and they just need that extra arm. Even if Kimbrel's not going to make the playoff roster, it's just a quote fresh arm that can help guide them, even if it's just one inning out of the sixth or seventh inning. I can't imagine that there's a spot from a fantasy perspective that he actually gets signed into and they throw him in right into a closing position. So not anything you have to worry about in this case. Obviously doesn't really impact that he already was demoted by Baltimore long ago, so that's not really affecting even that situation. I'll go back up to this other note, Kevin, right above it. The in Los Angeles, the Dodgers optioned Bobby Miller alongside Michael Grove to the minors, pretty much ending their season. Possibility, obviously any injuries or anything like that can manipulate it, and Miller could come back at the end of the regular season. But as of right now, it seems as though Landon Knack, who, as if he didn't do enough against Miami this past week, with his excellent return on investment, he's guaranteed. It looks like he's slotted to have a two-step next week. Here's the catch: his matchups, if he gets both starts, and a lot of this, you normally would say like, oh, the Dodgers do do the 6-man rotation. It's not, they don't really have 6 guys to do a 6-man rotation right now. And Yamamoto is basically doing every 5 days, regardless, always having, what is it, 5 days rest. So they're doing like a very, in the playoffs, that'll be a lot easier to manage, obviously, with the extra off days. But regardless, Landon Knack looks like he is going to start on Tuesday against the Padres at home, so in LA, but then goes on the road, great, to Colorado. And we've seen all season, including most recently, like pitchers succeed in Colorado, visiting pitchers succeed in Colorado simply just because the Rockies are so bad. Both,
Yep.
mostly offensively. And so this still, it's one of the very few two steps I think we're going to see that has a pitcher that's available in some leagues, in some situations. Um, is this a situation that is like, he did so well, he has such potential regardless of the matchups. The volume is so important. I'm going to be spending a good chunk of my money if he's available in this situation.
Yeah, maybe. Like I said, we're gonna say this a lot this week.
Just teeing it up.
Team and league dependent, but I think so. And um, agreeing with much of what you were saying there, I'm more worried about the San Diego start than I am about the
Right.
at Colorado start,
Not a good way
which
to start the
doesn't
week.
mean I'm
Yep.
not worried about the at Colorado start. That means this is 2 not good matchups, but I think this is definitely something you roll with unless you're protecting ratios. I think you give this a shot, yes. And there's the availability is a little better than I would expect. He was 90% rostered for 15-team main events, but only 29% in 12s. So if you're in a 12-team league, chasing wins and strikeouts, willing to take on the risk of a couple of tough matchups with your ratios, then yeah, I think this is a spot you roll.
I know I'm so surprised he's available in any main events. Just because I know he only went like 2 innings the start before, but leading into this week, the matchup, I know it's only one start, but the one start against Miami, in Miami, like, I'm just surprised that, he's not, unless he was rostered prior and he ended up being dropped in a couple of leagues for this week, making him available in those 10%. But yeah, where he's available, he
And
definitely has
I
to be on
think
the
he'll
radar.
get both starts because we'll talk a little more about some of the other teams and schedules and their starting pitchers throughout this show. But yeah, the the Padres and even the Diamondbacks are mathematically still in the division race here. But with a 4-game lead over the second place Padres, it's almost a certainty that the Dodgers will have a first round bye. So seeing Knack for that second start is, I don't know, I would say probable for anybody in this final
Right.
week, but definitely a good chance he actually does get that second start.
And they're not going to want to push anybody else into that spot. They're going to have their spot
Right,
pinched up.
exactly.
They're going to want to set up their playoff rotation. Knack obviously is not in the top 3 there. Maybe Knack gets a spot start in the playoffs here or there based on whatever, how it works out, but he's not in the top 3. So you don't need to worry about him starting in that first series that the Dodgers actually have to participate in. Couple of returnees, which will lead us into the final kind of section here as we talk about some pitchers that we hope, or at least they hope, to come back. And we're going to get to those right after this break. All right. So we did get a couple of returnees this week, or by the time you're listening to this, we might have seen one of them as well on Sunday. We'll start first with Justin Steele in Chicago for the Cubs. He did return and went a good old 2 2/3 innings, 57 pitches, which, is a positive. You listen to Nick Pollock on the Plus Pitch podcast, you start listening to what he has to say about, and I agree with him. It's like, I question why, Cubs, why are you even doing this? I get it. He's probably got a pride thing. He wants to come out there, but come on. It gets to a point where, Kevin, do you start him next week? It is like, this is a step down from Gossman to an extent. Not only do you not trust how many innings he will throw or how many pitches he will throw, even if he throws more than 57 pitches, if he's as efficient or inefficient as he was in this last start, he's not going 5. He's not going to qualify for a win for sure. And he's pitching in Philadelphia next week. And so my question is, how do you treat this situation? It's not like you're probably not going after him as somebody who can actually help your team, but do you go after somebody in the Cubs bullpen to vulture a win, basically treating Steele as an opener, knowing he's not going to go 5 innings, or assuming at least, or do you just avoid this situation?
Well, I think he's definitely an opener of some sort. I don't think he's going 5 innings. So to begin answering your questions, no, I do not want Justin Steele in my starting lineup for the final week, unfortunately, just because I don't think he can contribute anywhere
Anything
that I would
positive? Yep.
need it.
Yeah, sure.
Right? There's not going to be enough innings for ratios to be a big help. It's 2 2/3 of scoreless baseball. That's like, we talk about this every week, 2 to 3 innings from a reliever that's not giving up any runs. That can help our ratios. We're down to 1 week, so this is probably not what I'm looking for. There could be uh, very unique circumstances where you don't need anything except my ratio's not getting blown up. And then maybe Justin Steele is somebody that would be one of my top 9 options in that instance. But the biggest thing for me, 1 strikeout in 12 batters faced, right? At 8.5% strikeout rate. I know it's 2 2/3 innings, but that's what it is. So we can't count on strikeouts from him coming back off this injury. We're not counting for innings. I almost think the chance of a win are 0 unless he would end up being the follower for some reason. Then I'd be all over it, but we don't know that. So yeah, I just don't see how he can help a fantasy baseball team other than a very unique situation where none of the counting stats matter and you just want your ratios to remain where they are.
None of it matters, is all I heard. No. The other returnee that we're expecting to see by the time you're listening to this, you'll know for sure, is Hunter Green is expected to start on Sunday for the Cincinnati Reds. This is interesting because obviously we get some more time. We don't know what he has done yet. We don't know where he's at. We also don't know if he has a guaranteed start next week. You would assume he would line up to finalize the season for the Reds, not in Cincinnati, as we'll get to. Cincinnati is on the road all of the final week. He will be in the friendly confines of Wrigley Field playing against the Cubs if he does make that start next Sunday. So do you trust Hunter Green coming back from his injury stint to make that final start where he might be available that you're going to actually spend that money on? If nothing else, he'll probably be in a lot of waterfall bids. How high up on the waterfall bids would you kind of put him with all the question marks about this?
Yeah, that is the thing. I so the fact that we get to see him on Sunday this weekend before
Right.
we have to make
Sure.
this decision, that does help. If he performs well and and not just performs well or decently well, um, but I want to hear how he feels after the game and such, because this is a situation where he wouldn't even be pitching this Sunday for Cincinnati if they didn't want to get him out there again next weekend before the end of the season, right? I think if everything goes well and he feels fine, they'll want to see him again that final start. So I think we'll get it. So I
Sure.
think I'm waiting till the last minute to make this
Yeah.
decision. If things look fairly well on Sunday, and most importantly, he feels good after
Mhm.
the game, then he might go 5 innings that final weekend. I don't think very many people will, very many pitchers,
Right.
whether they're good, not so good, contending teams, not so contending, unless it's a team and there are a couple of possibilities, unless they have to win on that Sunday to get into the postseason, I don't see a whole lot
Bunch
of
of
guys
bullpen
going
games. Yeah. Sure.
over 5 innings much, but some of them will get there, but they're going to be short cushions. We're not going to see
No.
very many 7, 8 inning games that day. That's for sure.
Minus very rare circumstances where you have a guy on an expiring contract, is somebody who's like just needs to go out there and they're like, we're not re-signing you. We're just going to throw your arm as much as it'll allow us to. And I'm, haven't looked at the possibilities there and kind of put those two and two together. So I'm sure there's at least one or two of those situations that you could consider. So a couple other ones, Kevin, I wanted to pick your brain about, as far as we've talked about Hunter Green, even Justin Steele, maybe not Justin Steele, maybe, there's going to be a lot of players in your waterfall bids, especially on the pitching side, right? You only got $1 to $10 left in your FAAB budgets. You're going to spend it all and you got to make sure you get something for your money, right? So
Yeah, and in
have,
most leagues, we're picking up we're 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 dropping most of our starting pitching,
yeah,
maybe saving one spot, because there's only 4 games on Monday. So this just isn't this is one thing I'm glad just came up, because I would have forgot to talk about this at the end. I think you want at least one bench pitcher, because there's only 4 games on Monday. So this isn't only 24 hours where something could go sideways on us, and all of a sudden we don't have our a ninth pitcher for our lineup. But most teams aren't playing till Tuesday, so it's a full 48 hours. We could get a lot of news in that time. So yeah, I do recommend, and I will definitely have at least one bench pitcher going into next week on most teams.
yeah, you just have a lot more flexibility to make those adjustments. You're going to have
Right.
8 teams that are going to lock those positions in your roster. But yeah, that's a great point to call out there. But we've got I got a list here of 4 guys who want to make a start next week. Whether or not they do or not is still up in the air, but they've all come out in some form or another saying they expect or they want, or their team has come back and said things are looking good. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1, you're not trusting this situation at all, and you're not starting them anywhere, even if you already do roster them. 5 being, if you have them on your roster, you're starting them, you trust that they're actually going to be out there. And then obviously anything between with 2, 3, and 4, you can do the math. So I'm just going to list them off. Give me the number and any insight into the situation that you might have. We'll stay in Cincinnati for the first one. Andrew Abbott says he is confident that he is going to make one final start. Didn't say when, doesn't say say what it'll be, or like if it'll be at the beginning of the week, at the end of the week. We do know, like I said before, Cincinnati is on the road all week. They will be in Cleveland for 2, and they will be in Chicago for 3. So this is the other part of this situation. They only have 5 games. So there's only 5
Mhm.
games of opportunity for him to come back in. And we just talked about Hunter Green probably making that final start. Rhett Lauder obviously just got called up. Nick Martinez is doing good things at the moment. And then you have Jacob Junis and Julian Aguilar kind of rounding it out for the those final 2 spots. Does Abbott make a start? If he does he make it as a starter? Does he make it as a long reliever? Where do you rank this situation? Is again 1 to 5, you're not starting him anywhere. 5, you have all the confidence in the world.
Yeah, this makes this whole rotation a little iffy for the week and kinda having me second guessing my optimism on Hunter Green being able to pitch on the final day of the season. Um, if
Maybe
Abbott's
they
gonna get in
piggyback it.
there.
Maybe they piggyback the
Yeah,
last game of the season.
absolutely. I would love for that. And, like, this worries me about
Yeah.
everybody that is right now listed on roster resource as starting pitchers for Cincinnati this week. I used Jacob Junis this last week. The ratios were great. He helped me out quite a bit. Uh, at Cleveland, that would be an option. I don't know a lot about Aguiar, so that would be where I would hope we would see Abbott. Nick Martinez has been great in spots all season long at the Cubs. Rhett Lauder, we'd like to see him at the Cubs. And then, we were just talking about Hunter Green. So I think this is making me a little more tepid on the entire Cincinnati pitching staff for the week, just not knowing. Jacob Junis, I would still be confident in. He may not start, but he'll piggyback. It'll be the opposite of what has been happening, right?
Yep.
So he'll get at least an outing with some innings. Nick Martinez and Lauder probably as well. So this question's Aguiar, Hunter Green. Does he get the start next weekend, or do we see Abbott? We're only going to see one or two of those three guys. We will see two of those three guys probably. But yeah, this kind of scares me away a little bit.
I think it puts him lower on if he's available, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh great, I'm glad he wants to make another start. Whether or not he makes the start or makes the piggyback makes a huge difference. If like let's just go with the idea that him and Hunter Green piggyback the final game of the season. What really matters is who's starting the game. I want the other guy. In Wrigley, I assume if they're piggybacking, they're one of them goes 4 innings, the other one goes 4 innings if they're obviously efficient enough to do so. And you obviously want the guy going that's entering the 5th inning, regardless of the situation. So yeah, not a fun situation, but you need to have these guys in your waterfall, even if they're at the bottom of your waterfall. The other guy here that I have in a bunch of places, I'm crossing my fingers just so we can see him one more time, is Robbie Ray. He seemed like he could be. He literally was like on roster resources expected starter for this past Monday for like what seemed like weeks, and they didn't pull him off until just like I think not until like Saturday. Like he was still listed there on Monday, or for that Monday or Tuesday start, and I was like, you are confusing me so much right now. But Robbie Ray still wants to make one more start. He did hit a little bit of a snag in one of his bullpen sessions recently, but came back, felt better. So it does look like as long as the Giants will allow him to do so, come back and make one more start. How many innings he goes, how many pitches he throws, with all of these guys, that is going to be a major question mark. But how much do you trust this situation with Robbie Ray making one more start for the Giants?
It would really depend on when we see him. I know Jason there at Roster Resource has him going on Wednesday at Arizona. I have zero interest in that. But
Yeah,
if it gets pushed back and we see him over the weekend versus St. Louis back at home in San Francisco,
there you go.
I'd let that run because we're getting some strikeouts and we might get him to 5 innings and him qualify for a win. But yeah, this is something I'd monitor over the weekend and really try to pin down if I think he's getting a start. I'm in at home versus St. Louis, but I'm out at Arizona.
All right. The other one you remind me to add to this list here in Los Angeles. We just talked about the Dodgers rotation and Landon Knack possibly getting 2 starts. Of course, they've got a couple other options. The other option that they might have is Clayton Kershaw, who wants to make one more start or at least an appearance heading into the playoffs. So before the regular season ends. Uh, I mean, do you trust Clayton Kershaw, even if, at this point, even if he wasn't possibly coming back from an injury?
Yeah, this has been interesting. We saw that the Dodgers had told us he was done for the regular season. Now all of a sudden, oh, maybe we get a start here. And this goes against everything I've said about some of the other pitchers. But we have seen this in the past from Clayton Kershaw. Yeah, his most recent outing was 1 inning, and yeah, they knew something was wrong and he went on the IL. We have seen Clayton Kershaw come back off the IL in the past, especially when his next start will be in the postseason. Once again, we're going to assume the Dodgers have a first round bye, so he's going to be well rested. I could see Clayton Kershaw going out there and giving us 5 innings, probably against San Diego. That's the
Right.
way Roster Resource has it now. That's the way it lines up. The way I'm looking at it, probably versus San Diego on Wednesday. But there's we're going to come down to some of these decisions this week where I would just be more comfortable with it being Clayton Kershaw than with some of the other names that might tempt us for other reasons. I think there is a decent chance that if he does get the start, he does go 5 innings.
Yeah, here's the rub. It's like, okay, fine. Maybe he doesn't start against the Padres. Maybe they push Bueller up a day because they have the off day on Monday and they would still be regular rest, and they push Kershaw back. Okay, fine. Now he's pitching in Colorado. So it's like, what, as we talked
Once
about with
again,
Dak.
I would rather
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
right? Just like
It's
we've
true.
talked before with
And-
Landon Knack, same way.
and- yeah,
I'm
it'll be
not
funny.
worried about Kershaw pitching in Colorado with this year's Colorado lineup. No way.
All right. And then the last one here, as I pull up these notes on Luis Castillo of Seattle, we thought, his season was going to be done. But manager Dan Wilson just came out, and I want to, make sure I quote this accordingly. Where'd he go? There he is. He is progressing as he should be, whatever that means, with his hamstring injury. And he is, Luis Castillo, that is eligible to return from the IL on Tuesday. And so if you are to take that very positive message from Dan Wilson, manager of the Mariners, to say that he will be available to be reinstated when he is eligible, or at least a couple days after the fact, Luis Castillo could make another start for the Mariners. And that would end up throwing him up against either at Houston if he actually comes back like right away, or if they hold him back, it could be against Oakland. So a very similar situation where you're like, obviously one is better than the other. This is still Luis Castillo. You still probably throw him regardless of what the matchup is. But a lot of this is also going to depend on where the Mariners stand on the playoff race in the American League wildcard race. If there's, if they're completely or mathematically removed from the equation, I mean, this is a non-question. I don't know that we'll know that on Sunday, though. Like, I don't know that math checks by Sunday with 6 more games to play for the Mariners in the final week. What are your thoughts on Castillo's situation with the Mariners making one more start?
Yeah, I'm going exactly where were leading me there. It's really going to depend on how Seattle's postseason chances are looking. I think by the time we get to Sunday evening and it's time to lock in our bids, 28 teams will have 6 game left, and Cleveland and Cincinnati will have 5 games left. So we'll have a pretty good idea. And I think this gets lost a lot of times when we'll see a team 3 back with 6 to go. They can do this, right? 3 back with 6 to go is very, very difficult, right? If you go 4-2 and your opponent goes 2-4, you only gain 2 of the 3 games you needed to.
Right.
You really got to get to the extremes and have a great week, and your opponent absolutely stink to gain 3 games in a 6-game week. So we will have a better idea on Sunday than I think most people realize if they take that into account. I think it's got to be 2 games or less, or we don't see Castillo, is what I'm going to plan on first. If he does happen to be available anywhere on Sunday, Seattle's got to be within 2 games of a wild card spot for me to have interest. Otherwise, I just don't think they'll use him.
Let's also keep in mind that, it's not just Seattle, like that. It's not just one team, especially in a wild card race. You're not just like you or another team in front of you. You usually have 2 or 3 teams either behind you or sandwiched around you that you're also fighting for. Like currently, right now, as we're recording this, Detroit and Minnesota are tied for the final spot in the American League wildcard spot. Then you have Seattle that's currently 2 games back. Then you have Boston, who's 4 games back. So again, Boston not mathematically, but they're still, they'd be right up there. They'd only be 2 games back from Seattle. Seattle not only is 2 games back from the spot, but they have 2 teams that they have to jump over as well. So yeah, to your point, 2 games back, it is still like, that's still kind of like the threshold, because it's not 2 games back from one team, it's 2 games back from 2 teams in their current situation. So yeah, a lot to consider there as far as whether or not they kind of push Castillo back. And I will say, if they are going to push him back, I do think that they would push him back Tuesday, when he's first eligible, so that he does line up to be a starter in that first series if they were to magically move themselves into that first wild card round as well. So I do think he'll
This
get
is
at
something
Houston.
I've been looking at quite a bit because we have these. So we have some tight races here. A starting pitcher could go on Thursday this coming week and pitch game 1 of their postseason series on
Okay.
normal 4 days rest. So as late as Thursday, and that's some. As I'm looking at this over the weekend, and we're going to say that a lot as we start getting into player names here. There's going to be a lot to really keep extra focus on over this weekend. And one of those things I'm going to be looking at is teams that are looking to be in this wild card series and how their starting pitching lines up. The latest they can go and get normal rest to pitch game 1 is Thursday.
Yeah, great to keep in mind, because the difference between pitch for some of these series, the difference between pitching Wednesday and Thursday is a big difference, as far as who your opponent is or where you're pitching in. All right, let's get to. You've been alluding to it a lot. We're going to talk about actual players that are available and that can help you in the final week of the season, and we are going to do that right after this break. All right, we are back, and we are still listening to On the Wire for the final FAAB period of the 2024 fantasy baseball season. And hopefully all season long, you've been listening to us and listening to the news we're going over. And of course, listening on a daily basis to the First Pitch podcast with Casey Bubba and Jake Crumpler. They break down all the news, especially the news we don't touch on as well, with all the highlights and observations from every day's worth of games. Looking ahead at every slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy league down the stretch. And of course, Nick Pollock had you covered with the starting pitching matchups on his Plus Pitch podcast. He highlights every starting pitcher performance from the day prior, and also looking ahead for your daily leagues at all your streaming options for the next day or two's worth of games. So Kevin got a lot of other resources for us We're going to lean on you for the final piece of research that you could possibly be doing to spend the 1, 2, maybe $10, maybe of double digits still. And I mean, if you're doing it, if you're doing it right, you probably don't at this point, but that means you need names to fill those waterfall bids. And so at least give us some names that we can tack into the waterfall bids. Is really going to depend on your individual situation, where these guys or where these options fit into your waterfall bids. And you're gonna give you some names in power and speed and opportunity. You can bid on all of them regardless, but maybe just put them in the order that you actually need help in, specifically. So in the power category, we'll start there. If this is where you can make up the most ground, where can we spend our final FAAB dollars to get some home runs or RBIs for this final week?
Well, it took a while, but over the past few weeks, Hunter Goodman in Colorado has played nearly every day. Uh, Part of that is because he played quite a bit of outfield and some games at designated hitter, but now over the past couple of weeks, we have 7 starts at catcher in the last 10 games. That gets him to 19 games. So this doesn't have anything to do with this final week, Adam, but we need one more game caught by Hunter Goodman for this 24-year-old that has 13 home runs and just over 200 plate appearances to have catcher eligibility for us next season. I think that's going to be a big deal in 2 catcher leagues. But I think in many formats, not just 2 catcher leagues, because he does qualify at outfield as well. Hunter Goodman has been on a tear recently. He's got, 5 home runs in his last 8 games. So that's 13. That's 5 of the 13 he has on the season. But even overall, 13 and 200 plate appearances. That's a 35 to 40 home run season is what he's pacing for. Now getting the everyday playing time here late. I believe um, I I thought Colorado gets half of their games at
They
home
do.
this
Yes,
week. Yes,
against the
half
Dodgers
of
to
them at
end the week.
home.
Yep,
Yeah. Hunter Goodman is, 84% rostered in 15s, which makes sense. He's been catcher eligible all season
sure.
in FBC formats, but only 27% in 12s, and even if it's a single catcher league and you need an outfielder or a DH, I think Hunter Goodman could be a good play this week. He's been on fire.
Yeah, keep an eye on those games played and obviously the formats in which you play in and the platforms and their rules about player eligibility. We joked earlier in the
Because when we
season.
first start drafting,
Yes,
the position eligibility isn't updated. So we talk about the phantom catchers every year. Hunter Goodman would already be catcher eligible in sites, and people may not realize it.
but there's going to be other players that we joked about it earlier in the season or just a couple weeks ago, I think, where Vlad Guerrero was getting third base starts and he's gotten the eligibility for this year because he had the
Yep,
10 games started. But he's only gotten 11 appearances at third base all season. He obviously won't gain it for next year. But if you draft in early October on the NFBC platform, he's
it's
going to
going to
show up
say,
as third base eligible. So just know
yeah,
he's gonna lose that.
yeah.
And they will adjust it. It's
That's
not as
funny,
though you draft them as a
Adam.
third
We're going to
baseman,
be
you get to keep
drafting in
it.
2 weeks. You know this, right? We're going to be drafting. I know
But
some already have, but
yes.
it's still gonna be kind of early. We're gonna be drafting soon.
All right. Well, then we're gonna have to draft all the categories, Kevin, and let's get into some speed options here. Actually, we missed somebody. I don't know if you want to talk about him in the power category or opportunity. I will let you make the transition as you see fit. There's an obvious name that we left out of the news section that I thought would be better to place in here in the recommendations. So I'm going to continue with my introduction of the category, and I'll let you kind of place them where you think it makes the most sense. But we need some speed as well. I like when you found the name to add to the outline, you got excited about his availability. He is regularly available. Talk to me about somebody that can get me some stolen bases, runs scored as well.
Yeah, well, okay, that's Michael Ciani in St. Louis. We'll start there. He's been running recently and getting everyday playing time in St. Louis. It's that simple, and that's what we want to see going into the final week of the season.
Mhm.
Somebody that is getting the playing time opportunity and the green light opportunity. We'll take it. We need stolen bases. Let's go. You are referring to Ozzy Albies. I'm think. Is that who you're talking about?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, that was pretty obvious.
yeah. So yeah, and I think it's more of an opportunity play because he can give us power at times, doesn't always, but can go on some streaks. And same with the stolen bases. Early in the year, he had 2 stolen bases in the first 8 weeks of the season, but he's had, 5 in the last 5 weeks that he played, the last 5 scoring periods before he hit the IL. So yeah, opportunity is where I would put Albies, but we know he can help us in power. He can help us in speed. Atlanta's lineup as a whole has kind of picked it up recently, scoring more runs in spite of the fiasco of the tie game and they against the
Oh
Dodgers, and then
man.
they gave up 7 runs
Yep.
in the ninth, and that looked really ugly. But for the most part, in general, we've seen Matt Olson and some of the others that underperformed this season for Atlanta performing better. So absolutely, I would love to get Ozzy Albies in my lineup. And here's the thing: if you have money left, you can get Ozzy Albies in a lot of places. He's only 39% rostered in the 15-team main events. So he's out there. And obviously, probably I would say top target in leagues and almost the same rostership in 12s, 35%, but available in 2/3 or close to it, even in 15-team leagues. Ozzy Albies is the guy, but in spots where you don't have money, and in spots where other people have more money than you, in spots where there's 40% of leagues, Ozzy Albies isn't available. Michael Ciani has been getting the playing time and the green light over the past couple of weeks. I think you're on mute, Adam.
Let's come back to Atlanta in this Albie situation since it's already come up. Um, you know, obviously Albies can help us. What kind of
Mhm.
impact though does he have being present in the Atlanta lineup? Where does he slot into the lineup now? We know he was at the top of the lineup when healthy for the majority of the time, either lead off or even batting second. Right now, Michael Harris is on a little bit of a tear. Jorge Soler is doing just fine in that 2 hole. Does Albies just slot into the bottom half of that lineup? And then on top of that, who's losing out? Like he's obviously going to play second base. He's going to play as often as his body will allow. Does Merrifield just come out of the game completely? Do they? Like, there was talks about Merrifield moving into left field. So does that mean Laureano's seeing less time, or does Merrifield play over at third base? Gio Urshela takes a little bit of a backseat. What are you expecting to see over the weekend that can give us a little bit more insight in Atlanta?
I think it's probably a combination of all of that. Um, I think Whit Merrifield, Urshela, and um, who was the
Laureano.
other one you mentioned? Oh yeah, Laureano. Yeah, I think they all take a hit. I think those 3 guys are split in 2 spots now, and they have had spots to themselves. Is the way I see it playing out. Of course, one of them could really lose out, and we don't see him play the rest of the season. I don't foresee that, but we've been seeing Whit Merrifield every day. That
Yeah,
probably does not continue,
yeah,
unfortunately, for
that's
those that are I mean, if you're counting on Whit Merrifield,
sure.
it's because you need right? You are just hoping for a stolen base or 2 with a decent batting average. So hopefully we don't see a drastic loss in playing time if that's what you need. And if it is, you probably should
I'm
be
sorry.
prepared to move on for this final week.
Yeah, move on to Michael Ciani instead, and
There you
you'll be
go.
fine. There you go. All right, we have other opportunities to consider as well. So the schedule is pretty clean. You talked about it before. There's only 4 games on Monday, so only 8 games are playing. But nobody has 7 games, so everybody else is off on Thursday. There's 5. There are 2 teams that have the 5 game slate. We talked about Cincinnati earlier, and then Cleveland. So if you like Ohio-based baseball, you are getting less of it this coming week, the final week of the season. Sorry. Not to mention that Cincinnati's on the road the entire week, so there's one stadium that's not in Ohio that's not getting any baseball. Colorado is home for. Are they home for all week? I thought they were. I thought they were in.
No, it's just half the week.
Yeah. So they are away for the beginning of the week, and then they host the Dodgers for the final part of the week to end the season. Like I said, Cincinnati's on the road for all 5. They have 2 at Cleveland, so they're just consolidating all the Ohio baseball into one stadium for 2 games, and then they go over to Chicago to play in Wrigley for the final 3. With all that in mind, and anything else you want to consider, Kevin, who has a good opportunity ahead of themselves, who may be available to spend our final FAAB dollars on?
Yeah, he's rostered in most 15s, but he's got availability in 12s. And he's only available in about a third of 12s. But I think Tommy Pham is just fascinating to me, and to a lot of fantasy players, I think, because we see him get picked up when he goes to a new team. We see him get dropped when he struggles. He's somebody we could talk about on this show almost every week of the season. And he's 98% rostered in 15s and 2/3 of 12-team RotoWire online championships. He is rostered, but he is leading off every day. And in the leagues he's not rostered, the only thing I can think of is people haven't noticed that. He's the everyday leadoff hitter for the Kansas City Royals, and he's got a couple of stolen bases, couple home runs since coming over. There's only like 70 plate appearances, so he's doing his thing. 7 runs, 7 RBI. He is a 5 category contributor, not exceptional in any of the 5, but positive in all 5. And I really thought he would be more universally rostered at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to check. You always have to check. Like you said, 98% in the main event. So obviously
Yeah.
readily, rostered. But there's going to be one or what is that, 2, maybe 3 rosters that 98% covers. That means he's available or in leagues. But the fact that he is available as a leadoff hitter on a playoff team, playing every day, and can contribute in all 5 categories is insane that he's not rostered in those 12 and 100% of those 12s at this point. And we joked about it just like a
We
couple
all
weeks
know that
ago.
he plays with a chip on his
This is what
shoulder,
he
right?
does. This
This is
happens.
what he does, and I saw a post-game interview with him the other day. This is an ideal situation for a guy like Tommy Pham and somebody who thinks like Tommy Pham does. He's getting interviewed after the game when he had a big game, hit one of those home runs, helped win the game. My job is to get on base in front of the best player in baseball, right? He's hitting in front of Bobby Witt
Bobby
Jr.
Witt.
He knows how to help his team win, and that's his focus. I love that.
Yeah, not to mention Salvi's playing right behind him as well. So
Yep.
lots of bat to knock him in. So the fact that he kind of knows that role, he knows what he needs to be doing, and he's rolling with
And
it.
it's not the White Sox. Sorry, had to throw that in there. It's gotta be so refreshing to a
Oh
player.
man, I can all those. I just feel bad for like the Luis Robert and Andrew Vaughn's
Yeah.
and like the guys that have at least some talent, and just like what is going on. All right, we've roasted the White Sox plenty this season, so we can move on now, Kevin. We'll get into some pitching options for your final FAAB dollars. We're gonna do that right after this break. All right, we got to spend our dollars. As I said earlier in the show, I expect most of our FAAB dollars to be going toward pitching, rotating out those rotation pieces that have really bad matchups, even if they are guys that you drafted in the first 5 or 6 rounds. If you don't trust them, you don't start them. If you're not going to start them, you might as well bench them. All right, sorry, you might as well drop them. So you got to fill those roster spots and those starting spots as well. Sure, you can have those that one, if not two bench spots because you have such flexibility on Monday, as you mentioned earlier. But you're probably bidding on guys you expect to start this week and not guys that you expect to bench. So who is out there, Kevin, that you would actually want to start with the matchups that they have slated?
Yeah, really quick, I want to tie a couple of things in here to what we usually talk about at the end, but there, and we've alluded to it
Mhm,
already. We know this is a crazy week for projecting who's even going to start, let alone how they perform.
mhm,
But there are right the AL Central, perfect example, right? And we're all going to start Tariq Skubal. We're all going to start Cole Reagans. We're all going to start Bailey Ober. We're going to see all of those guys on Tuesday. We won't know until next Saturday if we're going to see them on Sunday, probably, right? It's going to depend. Do they have to win Sunday? No. Then we're going to see all of these guys on Tuesday as game one starters in the playoffs,
mhm,
right? We're not going to know. Now, there's other guys, and one of them at least on these same teams, Seth Lugo is set to have a one start this week. He's going to pitch Sunday against San Francisco. And this is what you have to ask yourself. Is Kansas City going to have to win on Saturday? Or are they going to have a 2-game cushion for the postseason? Because Seth Lugo is absolutely somebody Kansas City wants to see in that wild card round pitching for them. But if he pitches Saturday, the wild card round's over before he's available again, even on short rest. So this is the thing. We're going to have to look at all of this on Sunday and really try to decide. Like I said, anything over 2 games is probably more. In most instances, it has happened. It can happen, of course, but realistically, it's not likely if anybody is over 2 games out. So that's what I'm going to be looking at, but not until the games are over on Sunday, and we're still looking 4 or 5 days ahead of time trying to project that. So I just wanted to bring that up with when we're looking at our starting pitchers for this week. A lot of this is going to change, and unfortunately, a lot of it's going to change after we make our decisions on Sunday. But we can really try to minimize it. And so Detroit is one of these teams, and they have a couple of pitchers that have been pitching really well recently, and they're highly rostered in 15s, Kiter Montero and Brant Herter, but they're both less than 20% rostered in 12s. And Montero gets the Chicago White Sox, love that,
mhm.
and Herter gets Tampa Bay. So these are two examples of guys I'm looking at, and for the most part, I'm looking for guys that, especially when we're looking at it's not just the weekend, it's beginning on Thursday. Like I said, if they go Thursday, they're not available until Tuesday. So I'm really looking at the you know 60%, the the last 60% of the week. None of those starts are guaranteed, and that's gonna be really tough. I think we will see Montero and Herter because Detroit, even if they're phenomenal this weekend and the first half of the week, they can't have just blown by everybody and not need to win these games. So I think we'll see these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter. I love the way you started this whole off. It's just like there's so many things you have to consider throughout the season, and then to throw in the scheduling question marks of the playoff matchups and the playoff schedule and the possibilities is just another fun wrinkle to
Oh,
have to
it's crazy.
think about it.
It's like, Vlad on the FTN podcast this week, the Vlad Sedler. He was talking about he really wishes he could put in the time and effort every week of the season that he puts into these last couple of weeks when we all know we have to look at all this. How much better fantasy players would we be if we looked at all of this every week of the season? Now, uh, we'd have to be able to make that our full-time job
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that to happen, and that's the very few people that do look at
Sure.
this much each and every week. But this last week, man,
But even then,
you got to do it.
baseball is just baseball too, and things happen that you can never have predicted. You have guys go out there and just completely fall on their face against the White Sox, and then you have other times where you're like, how did he do so well against the Dodgers? You know what I mean? And so,
Right.
and then you just have guys that get hurt, and there's so many things you can't predict, no matter how much time you spend analyzing everything. So that is also the beauty of baseball, and that's part of the why we do it. No matter how much we might complain about it in the moment, it still makes it that much more interesting throughout. So we talk about volume, talk about our wins and Ks that we can chase, and we can try to tack on based on the matchups. Still going to chip away at ratios, or at least going to fill those spots with the guys that you're going to drop because you don't trust them. You might need to, you got to get somebody back into your rotation. It doesn't have to be a starter, but if you are going to get quote stuck with somebody, you got to make sure that they're not going to hurt you anywhere. So who you want to add to your waterfall bids that you're going to feel comfortable throwing in there that's not going to hurt you anywhere and might even help you with your ratios.
Yeah, we didn't see much this week, but Manuel Rodriguez in Tampa. I think we'll see more of him down the stretch, especially if we don't see much of him this weekend. He's well rested, but he definitely got the ratios for us that we're looking for here on the year. But like we have talked multiple times throughout this season, it's not just ratios I'm looking at here. Um, if you need a starting pitcher in most instances, I'm probably looking at relievers for this week, trying to get lucky, even if I'm chasing wins, hoping they can snag one.
Mhm.
Looking at some of those guys, some of the guys we talked earlier, Adam, coming back off an injury, and we hope to see them. If we can kind of pin down who we would think would follow them, because
Exactly.
there's a good chance they don't go 5 innings. These are the guys I'm after. Uh, and but, we have talked about this all season. This category, it's not just ratios. It can help us in so many ways. They can snag us wins, they can snag us saves. They can accumulate strikeouts, especially if they get that third appearance in a week. But Manuel Rodriguez in Tampa has been good recently. We haven't seen him in a few days. So that that could be that could make this go either way, especially if we see him. If we would see him twice over the weekend, I'd completely take him out of my
Sure.
waterfall bid. But if we don't see him at all, or we see him on Friday or Saturday, then yeah, I'm adding him to my list like we've been talking all season.
Yeah, and like you said, these guys can vulture a save, they can vulture a win as well. And Tampa Bay is as unpredictable as they come, especially with Fairbanks being done for the season and making that official somewhat recently as well. We saw Uceta come in the eighth today, and Garrett Clevenger came in and got the final 3 outs of the ninth, getting the save for
Mm.
Tampa Bay. So it really can be anybody's situation. And what you really just want to avoid is somebody that's going to blow up your ratios, that's going to come in and that can happen with closers. You know what I mean? That closers you trust to
It
come in
can.
and get you a save, but they blow up. Iglesias on Sunday, Estevez in Philadelphia just the other day. And so you're still going to throw them out because you need the saves. But these guys you're throwing in here, you're hoping to get a save. You're hoping to get a vulture win. You're really putting them in there because you trust them to not hurt or blow up your ratios, if not help.
Right. The ratios is the foundation of why they're appealing. Yes.
But you still need those saves in a couple situations as well, Kevin. We noticed one that was a little bit, you couldn't, it's one of those things where it's like you couldn't believe you're actually bidding on somebody who's readily available, who's in line for saves, maybe one or two based on the team he's playing on. But I will preface your pick here with the situation at hand, and that is, I'm alluding to Kenley Jansen reporting some shoulder issues for the Boston Red Sox. Did get a 25 pitch save on Wednesday. Red Sox lost to Tampa Bay today as we're recording this on Thursday, so no opportunities there. Jansen, as I just read through, as we were recording this, is optimistic that he really wants to, just like all these other starters that we talked about wanting to make their one more start, he wants to finish strong in the season. Now, he just did pitch 25. He threw 25 pitches on Wednesday. He's reporting shoulder issues. I would venture to guess he'll take the weekend off. That's not to say he doesn't come back for the final week. Obviously, that's going to have a lot to do with him. It's going to have a lot to do with Boston. But what it has less to do with is his contract. He has no contract after this season, no options or opt-in clauses or anything like that. So he is a free agent. So this is a situation where I alluded to earlier, where Boston could be like, fine, you really want to push it? We got nothing to play for. You go right ahead. We'll, get every pitch out of your arm that you're willing to throw for us, and save somebody else. Or, maybe there's a chance that they do want to re-sign him. I don't foresee that happening. What's your thoughts on the situation in the Boston bullpen? And do you trust? Are you trusting your gut to be bidding on somebody else who's available in the Boston bullpen to get you some saves if you're that desperate?
Yes, I think so. I hope so.
Fair.
I really think, um, I mean, when I heard this reported earlier, and then we were talking about it right before we started recording, it sounded a little worse than what we are reading now. And I don't know if that's timing or if it's just different um, perspectives, because I hadn't heard it much before you and I were talking about it. Yes, he had and 25 pitches and finishing with the save and then reporting discomfort, but actually finishing the game leads me to believe that maybe this isn't too serious, but this is definitely worth monitoring. This time of year, it's nearly impossible to find somebody available with save opportunities, even for the final week, even if it's just for a couple of them, we're hoping. But there's some teams in some leagues are just scrounging. They'll take anything they could get. And I really think if it's not Kenley Jansen, it will be Chris Martin. So this is just monitoring over the weekend, and if you need saves and you think there's any chance at all that we're not going to see Kenley Jansen, or even not see him until the final weekend, maybe they give him one more outing out there next weekend, then Chris Martin should definitely be a target of yours this week. I just can't foresee adding saves in nearly any format that would be someone of the caliber of Chris Martin at this point. You're going to have the Colorado guys maybe available in some leagues, and some of the other very volatile situations that we've talked about in recent weeks. But if Kenley Jansen is going to get shut down or be limited, you're not going to find anybody better than Chris Martin out there, I wouldn't think, for the final week of the season.
Yeah, obviously a lot can happen over the weekend. Some names to keep an eye on in Boston as well. Luis Garcia, who they just traded for at the deadline,
Mhm.
and Lucas Sims, expected to be back, or at least available over the weekend, as well as they're reported to be both in St. Petersburg while all the Red Sox are playing Tampa Bay. So they could be in the mix for at least consideration as well, making some difficult decisions for Alex Cora to make. If hey, we want to see if we can throw these guys in at the end of the game in the final week, or we'll just lean on Chris Martin, which obviously is a safer play here. But they don't care about they may not care about a safer play with nothing to actually play for. So we'll see what happens. I expect to see anybody but Kenley Jansen getting saves over the weekend, which will make everybody that much more interesting to be bidding on Sunday in the situations where you actually need saves. If you're not in that situation, just be thankful. Any other
Yes.
players out there, Kevin, that either didn't fit into one of these categories or just you forgot to mention or kind of want to throw in at the last second that you won't be surprised to see some bids on in the final week?
Not really, but, and you're speaking of, we typically call this our wild card category. I think it everybody's a wild
Every's a
card
wild
right
card.
now. Anybody not
Exactly.
rostered, right? I am look I'm taking a look at everybody. Is there a way they can help me, right? Most of our teams, we know what we need. For our hitters, it's probably either gonna be home runs or steals, maybe runs, uh, but it's probably we're probably gonna be able to pin down what we need, and I'm looking at almost anybody, and yeah, here we are Thursday evening on come Sunday. Here's the great thing, there's not a Sunday night game, right? Everybody plays at approximately 3 o'clock Eastern time. So we're gonna have about 4 hours before FAAB runs that every game is completed. Include other than usually that's the case except for one game. We're not even gonna have that one game. We're gonna have all of the results that are possible to have to this point. We can take a look at it and make our best guesses in many instances, especially offensively, it's just playing time. And then on the pitching side, matchups like we've been talking all season. But yeah, this is gonna be fun. We got 1 week to go, Adam.
Phillies in at City Field at the Mets, they play at 7:15 Eastern. So there is the one late
Oh, they
game
do?
on Sunday.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
The final
I
Sunday of the
thought they were
season.
all 3 p.m. games.
Yeah, the final game, the final Sunday of the season. There are no, yeah, every game is at like 3 o'clock or Eastern time, literally across the
Oh,
country.
that's what I
Love
was
that. I
doing.
love
I
that
was
they did that.
confusing the 2 weeks there,
But yeah,
which
still
makes
only one
perfect
game.
sense.
I mean, obviously the same as every other Sunday with that one Sunday night game. It is the
Yeah.
final Sunday night game. And I realize that because in my head-to-head championship, I always like to see if I can possibly get the starter for one of those teams in my daily moves leagues. For that Sunday night game, so it's like I can decide at the very last second, do I need ratio hit? Do I need that win? No, I don't need to start that guy. It gives you, just a modicum of flexibility. Not possible because that is Tyler McGill and Zach Wheeler scheduled to start on Sunday. You're not picking up either one of those guys at the moment. Maybe McGill in like a shallower league, but obviously you're not picking up Wheeler anywhere. All right. Well, Kevin, this will be fun. Fun is a word. Whether or not you want to use it to
Mm.
describe this fab period or not is up to you. But is there anything else that you can leave with us? You kind of scattered out your final thoughts throughout this
Yeah,
episode today. It was great.
exactly.
Um,
I think we've talked about a lot of it. Yeah, just extra planning, allow some extra time. And some of it's gonna depend on how you feel the week is going to go as far as wins and losses, especially when we're looking at next weekend's pitching. Take that into account. Make your call and roll with it.
mhm. Trust your gut, as of course, Vlad Seller would say. Not
Yeah,
to steal that line from him or that idea, but really, it's like get to the point where you're putting it. You only have so many dollars to go, and I think I kind of alluded to this throughout the show. I'll add in, like, just make sure you win something for
yeah.
every person that you need to drop. You need to fill it. You need to fill it as well. So,
Even even if it's a reliever.
right.
Because and you don't wanna have to decide until Tuesday if you think that pitcher's gonna start next weekend or not, right? Have a reliever as your backup for that spot. Get somebody in every spot. Yeah, you shouldn't have any injured guys left on your roster. It may mean just adding 4 or 5 extra $1 guys at the end of a waterfall, but you never know. It could
Mhm.
be somebody that could end up helping you win a league or cash in a league.
And there's some interesting names that NFBC usually has in the free agent set. So, you still have some bench guys. So if you want to have some fun with it as well,
Mhm.
go ahead and get some of those fun names in there. Take some screenshots. Make sure if you've got I think Danielle Salinger might still be in there as a catcher. She was available for a draft a couple years ago. So keep an eye out for
Yeah.
names like that and throw them on your bench. If you do that, you have that kind of flexibility. Make sure you take a screenshot and throw it on Twitter and let us know.
One more thing, Adam. I think we are planning on taking next week off. I think is what we decided, possibly. So good luck to everybody for
Yes.
this last week. And then congratulations for the wins, for the cashes, for the just moving up a spot or two from the bottom if you had a really rough year with injuries and such. Congratulations. We're there.
Yeah, we're there. And it's stretch run, and then you know what? Like you said earlier, Kevin, then we can start drafting again. So,
Yes.
all right. With all of that and everything else that we talked about, that is going to wrap it up for episode 182 of On the Wire. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hasting. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.